Morning, everyone. I know it's been a while since I last posted. There's been a hell of a lot going on. And with the death of my downstairs neighbour, we were close. It came completely out of the blue. Although running up to it, she wasn't very well. She had these spouts of not being well and then being fine. But she was taken into hospital and died within 24 hours. She went peacefully, but it was a bit of a shock, realistically. But it's taken a bit of getting used to, especially for my son. He's struggled with it all a lot more than I actually thought he would, realistically. He wasn't as close to her as I was, but autistics, you never know how they're going to respond to things like that. Anyway, new video. It's taken me a while to actually do this one, purely because there was a hell of a lot of scientific research I had to do on this one, looking up a lot of stuff, and then having to whittle it down to what I actually could put on here without getting in trouble. So this is called, well, the simplified version of this name is Usher's syndrome. And I say it's a simple version of its name because, trust me, trying to pronounce this, I'm still struggling. Now, there are two versions or two variations of this condition. Antiphospholipid, and it's pronounced, syndrome. It is actually spelled Antiphospholipid. That's how it's spelt, with a syndrome at the end. I can't pronounce it no matter how hard I try. But it's APS for short. Now, there is a more severe form of this, which is catastrophic APS, and it's CAPS, okay, for short. So, now, researching this was insane, which is really strange because I found that there's one, not a lot of research on this, and two, a hell of a lot of research on this, which is quite contradictory, realistically, because what I found is there's a lot of theories in the research surrounding this conditions, and at the same time, there's not a lot of actual proven work in this condition. So although the research that has been done and proved isn't that great, there is not a lot of actual proven anything around. There is a lot of theories. It's really complicated, and it's exceptional sitting there trying to figure out whether this is well researched or not. Took me a while, and it kind of gave me a headache. What I've come to the conclusion of is that this is, one, this has been researched, and two, there is not a lot of research that has been proven, but there are a hell of a lot of theories and studies on it. Okay, now, that being said, there are things they do know. One, that there is a reason to believe that this condition is exceptionally unique. One thing that has been proved, this condition is unique to anything. It's an autoimmune condition, by the way. I should have said that too. It is an autoimmune condition, but it's one of the most unique. Evidence has proved that because it's both a clinical and a physiopathological condition. Now, this is because of the features that surround CAPS. Now, because in CAPS you will find the presence of that stupidly long word that I cannot pronounce, antiphospholipid, there you go, I'll pronounce it like that, antiphospholipid antibodies. There you go, that's a way to pronounce it. Antiphospholipid antibodies, which are known as APLAS. Now, these antibodies, I had to look it all up because I didn't know what it all meant. Now, these antibodies are directed against phosphorus fat components of cell membranes called phospholipids. And then that is actually what they are. They're antibodies that go against the cell membranes of phospholipids. And then it got into real scientific stuff that I actually didn't understand, and didn't matter how hard I researched it, I didn't understand it. But that is what antiphospholipid, that is what they are and what they do. Look it up, seriously. It's really interesting stuff. And it also has, so not only does it have the presence of these APLAs, which are these antibodies, it also has what's called a microthrombosis. Microthrombosis. SES at the end. Now, these aren't just microclots, but they're microclots that appear in the lungs, the heart, and the brain mostly, or they can appear in your veins and your arteries. But they're just microclots. Realistically, I looked it up. Although there's a hell of a lot of ridiculous notions in between all that research, they are literally microclots with a whole load of jargon in between it. And they are just the antibody side of all of this. The physiopsychological side of all of this shows anemia and thrombocytopenia. Thrombocytopenia, and that's spelled THROMBOCYTOPENAIA, and it literally means a low blood count. So the fact that you are able to, which is why this condition is actually very unique, because not only could you end up with, blood clots, you could also end up having a low blood count, which is exceptionally rare. It's a condition that is so unique because, one, this condition can produce low blood counts, but it can also produce blood clots. But because of this is why it's classed as an autoimmune condition. Now, there have been a few theories proposed to explain this molecular mimicry, and that is what they've classed it as. They've classed these two conflicting, these antibodies and physiological features of this condition as molecular mimicry of microorganisms and natural anticoagulants. That's quite a hell to look into. There are theories out there, and the possible reasons for this cross reaction of the APLAs, and especially in CAPS, but it has been a genetic factor that has been suggested, but they've never proved it. They haven't been able to prove that one yet. One thing they do know, absolute fact, is that people that CAPS is represented the 1% of people who actually have APS, and it has a high mortality rate if that's the case. And it's normally that comes with multi-organ failure, so it means that it's your blood clots that come through with things like your veins and your arteries, causing your organs to fail. Now, CAPS is closely associated with APS. Absolutely. Most people, that APS, that 1% is exceptionally important, because most people with CAPS actually do have or have had APS or started with APS. It is its most extreme version. It is closely associated, and it suggests there's an overlap. It absolutely does. From the research I have done, and if you take out all the scientific terminology, it actually does suggest completely 100% that those with majority of those, I say the majority, not all, the majority of those with CAPS actually have or had APS to start with. Now, I did find enough science that I could understand, that I could bring forward, which is kind of cool, because I quite like knowing what kind of genes we're looking at, what kind of DNA we're looking at. Now, in the development of thrombocytopenia, that THROMBOCYTOPENIA, that one, and the microangiopathic anemia, and you get specific APLAs. Now, the APLAs you're looking for, specific APLAs that you're looking for, or doctors are looking for in this condition, are called anti-C2. Now, in Germany, there is a letter. It's a funny looking B and represents two S's. I don't know how to pronounce it I actually do not know how to pronounce it outside of the German alphabet, but it looks like this. I don't know if you can see that. It looks like that. It's a funny looking B, but it actually represents in Germany two S's. I don't know what that means with these specific things, but that's what it is, and it actually represents two S's, and it's a 2. So this funny looking B and a 2 / glycoprotein, right? So that's what we're looking at here, these anti-funny B2s. Glycoprotein 1 is a genetic DNA, is a DNA, something you'll find in your DNA. It's what they look for. It's an antibody inside of you that they will look for this condition. And also an anticardiolipin antibodies, otherwise known as ACL. Now, both of these are known to be both of these are known as absolute proof positive of this condition. If they are found in your blood, then you know that either you're a carrier, or if you're having symptoms, you are actually carrying. Not only are you a carrier, or having symptoms, obviously, then you have this condition. But that is what those two actual antibody or APLAs are what doctors look for specifically, is what they look for. Okay. Especially with patients with CAPS. And normally with CAPS, there is a rapid onset of multi-organ failure with acute respiratory distress syndrome. Is also in about 25% of people with CAPS. It is a strange one. Patients with CAPS are vary. Some do not die easily, quickly. Some, however, will just. Some can live a life, a normal life, even with CAPS. Some can actually live a long life. There is a mortality rate with CAPS, but it's about 10 years, whereas some do not get that. It depends on how quickly the symptoms actually last. But there can be a rapid onset of multi-organ failure, as well as acute respiratory distress. And that is actually found in 25% of them. Now, one thing that is very clear that they have found absolutely 100%, it is proven, point positive, 70% of people with APS are female. And 30 to 40% of those people will also have lupus. Now that was something that I found very interesting, because lupus is an autoimmune condition that is not very nice. I think I have already covered it, but I'm not 100% sure. If I haven't, I will. My aunt, or my great aunt on my mother's side, she has lupus. She does struggle. She has a lot of issues with her movement at the moment. The last time I saw her, she had a lot of movement issues and things like that, and that was several months ago. She doesn't go out very much anymore, and we're not that close, to be honest. She was my grandmother's sister's daughter, and we were never close to that side of the family. I saw her about, we'd chat, we'd talk, but she does have lupus. Now, people with APS or even CAPS, they have to be on medication for life. It's a lifelong thing. But again, it can be fatal. Even people with APS, it can be fatal. And that is literally just due to blood clots in either the lungs, the brain, or the heart. In CAPS, you're looking at multiple blood clots, veins and arteries, especially throughout your body. That is what they will kill. That is what will kill them, because it will lead to multi-organ failure. Especially, blood clots in themselves could kill them, but it could also lead to multi-organ failure. I didn't go into a lot of detail with the CAPS because I was specifically looking into APS. But CAPS is the most severe form of this condition. Now, the symptoms of APS are things like high blood pressure, deep vein thrombosis or DVT, strokes, even sort of mini strokes can happen, heart attacks, which isn't surprising, pulmonary embolisms. If you don't know what that is, it's blood vessels that blockage. It's a blood vessel blockage in your lungs. Balance and mobility issues. Vision problems. They're looking specifically for things like double vision. Speech and memory problems. Tingling sensations in the arms and legs. Things like pins and needles. Fatigue. Constantly tired. Things like that. Repeated headaches, migraines. Now, if you have repeated headaches and migraines and sort of pins and needles, things like that you probably wouldn't pay that much attention to if you haven't had all the others yet. Because if you're used to things like that anyway, I wouldn't pay any attention to headaches, migraines, tingling in my arms and my legs, because I get them constantly. And I wouldn't pay much attention to chest pains either, because I get them as well. They're all part of my FND. I pay no attention to anything like mobility issues. I'd pay no attention to pins and needles in my arms and my legs. I'd pay no attention to headaches, to migraines, chest pains. I get them. They're nothing new to me. So one thing you would have to be careful of with some of these symptoms is the fact that if you already have a condition like mine, like FND, where these kind of symptoms are normal for you, be very careful, and look for something that's out of the ordinary. And if you feel like whatever you're going through, whatever your symptoms are naturally and normally, are either getting worse or feel off in any way, like you're getting more headaches than normal, you're getting more migraines than you normally would, like the pins and needles are worse than they have been in the past, or the chest pains aren't quite the same as they have been ever, seek a doctor, ask questions, find answers. Don't just brush it off. I mean, I have a tendency to brush those kinds of things off, but and things as well like memory loss wouldn't bother me at all, or even my eyesight. I've got serious issues with my eyes. It's nothing to do with my FND. I've got glaucoma, and other eye issues. I see double all the time. I get blurred vision, double vision all the time. I brush it off. So if you have these kind of symptoms, these milder type of symptoms anyway, be very careful that you're not brushing off a worse symptom just because you're having these symptoms as a normal everyday thing anyway. Okay, so look for things that in your normal symptoms that feel off in any way. And if you think there's something wrong with the symptoms you're having, they're getting worse, or they just don't feel like they normally would, see a doctor. Because the one thing you don't want to do is to brush off a normal symptom, something you normally have, and then find yourself in serious trouble later because you ignored it. Because 70%, right, moving on, right. Now, I did say it's 70% of cases of APS, and that are females. Now, with that comes pregnancy issues. So there can be things like reoccurring miscarriages, and you can have 2 to 3 miscarriages within the first 10 weeks. You might get 1 or 2 after the 10-week. You possibly could have 1 or 2 miscarriages after the 10-week mark. Or you could suffer things like a premature birth. And when you say premature, we're talking before the 34-week mark, which could cause things like preeclampsia, which is a pregnancy condition, which causes serious issues for both mother and baby, but it's really not a nice condition. I might cover that one because it's not enough is known about that one outside of the medical world. I might cover that one. Now, there's also other things that you would see which become physical. So there's something called livedo reticuloris, right, and that's Livedo, livedo, I don't know, and reticuloris, it's Reticularris. And this is a skin condition, funnily enough. It is caused by blood clots. In white or European people, it's red and blue blotches on the skin. In coloured people, regardless of the colour, in coloured people, whether you're brown or black, the skin will look, you'll have brown and black patches on your skin, rather than red and blue. There'll be brown and black patches, or blotches. So some people, however, on top of all of that, some people develop sores, ulcers, and some develop ulcers and bumps. Lovely. And then we get into a really fun one called superficial thrombophlebitis. That was a fun word to learn to say. It's THROMBOPHLEBITIS. I loved this one. It was so fun. Which is literally inflammation of veins under the skin in your legs, and it is similar to DVT. Okay. You will get swellings. There could be swelling or redness and tenderness along the affected veins. In rare conditions, you could end up with a temperature as high as 38 or above. But other than that, yeah, you're fine. Don't worry about it. Diagnosis is, like I said, if you're experiencing things like blood clots, and if women are experiencing things like, if you've had like several miscarriages but you don't have any real medical reason why, and you've had a lot of blood clots and you've had other symptoms, see a doctor. Get a blood test and ask them to check for the presence of the right antibodies and for clotting. They have to check for both. They have to check for clotting, whether or not your blood can clot, and they have to check for the antibodies. They have to do two tests. They have to do two tests 12 weeks apart. Because to get a diagnosis is a little strange, because they have to do these tests, you have to do them 12 weeks apart, and both blood tests have to show the two antibodies in them 12 weeks apart. Okay, but the presence of these antibodies is not enough to get a diagnosis. You can show the antibodies can be in your blood, they can prove positive you have this condition, but unless you're showing the symptoms, you are just a carrier. You have the presence of these antibodies in you, that's fine. Unless you are actually showing actual symptoms of the condition, they don't diagnose you as having APS. They just turn around and say, yes, you have these antibodies in you. You have them, they're there. You are literally just a carrier. But as there is no actual proof that this is a genetic condition, there is no way to know whether you can pass this on to your children or grandchildren or anything. There is no way of knowing this. There is no way of knowing if your parents or your grandparents or your great-grandparents had this condition, or even are carriers of this condition. If they're never shown symptoms, they could have just been carriers, and there's no way of knowing this. It's a very strange condition. They do not diagnose it unless you actually show symptoms, even if they find the antibodies. Very strange. But if, however, you are diagnosed with having APS, they found the antibodies in both tests 12 weeks apart, and you're actually showing symptoms, then you are put on medication. No buts, no maybes about it. You are put on an anticoagulant. It's usually more warfarin. Or you are put on an antiplatelet medication, depending on your symptoms. It is dependent on the symptoms you show. You are either put on an anticoagulant or an antiplatelet medication. The anticoagulant is usually a warfarin. The antiplatelet is usually a low-dose aspirin, and if you cannot take aspirin, it's something called clopidogrel. 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 I don't know if that's how it's really pronounced, but it sounds right to me. And you will take these for life, daily, for life. If, however, you are pregnant or you are planning to become pregnant, you must tell your doctor. On top of everything else, your medication has to change, especially if you are on an anticoagulant. Because if you are on warfarin, you will have to come off it. And coming off warfarin could worsen your symptoms, and you will have to start on heparin injections. Now, heparin is administered by hospitals, but they can actually teach you or train you to do them yourselves. So that would be up to the hospital, I'm assuming. So yeah, and I'm assuming there's an alternative if they need to take you off any other medication or change your other medication as well. But you would definitely have to come off warfarin and go on heparin. It's something that they do. Now, on top of all of this, you have to have a lifestyle change. Things like you would have to quit smoking, obviously. You would have to have a healthy and balanced diet, so things like low sugar. I mean, a bit like my sister Rianne, as a diabetic, she has to have a low sugar, high protein, diet. Not a lot of carbohydrates, because carbohydrates are bad for diabetics, but lots of fruit and vegetables, low in sugar. And this is the same. It's lots of fruit and vegetables, low in sugar. Okay. Plenty of exercise. You would have to have a exercise routine that you stick to. And if you are overweight, you would have to work with a coach to help you lose the weight, so you can live a longer life, a better life, because to reduce the risk of things like heart attacks and blood clots. They don't like taking risks with this condition, and doctors are very kind of strict with a condition like this. They just are. This condition, they want their patients to live a long life, and with ARDS, they can. They can. They actually can with this condition, but they have to do it the right way. You have to. There are restrictions put on them, and doctors monitor them closely. You have to wear a Medi-Alert. Absolutely, you have to. Doctors, hospitals, nurses, they need to know that you have this condition. Absolutely need to know you have this condition, because they need to know what kind of medication you're on. It's essential. All right. Now, I took out a hell of a lot of scientisty stuff for that. It took me a while and it gave me a headache. But funnily enough, I actually really enjoyed looking into that one. It was fun. But yeah, I'll see you all later. All right, bye bye.